lined fabric tote bag, you'll need a 1/2 yard of each fabric. You'll need to cut 2 14 by 14 inch pieces for the outside of the bag, 2 14 by 14 inch pieces for the lining of the bag, and then you will need to cut 2 4 inch by 22 inch strips for the handles. Now we're going to take one of the strips of fabric and we're going to fold it in half the long ways. We're going to give it a press to make a crease and do this along the full strip of the fabric. Now we're going to open this up and we're going to take the edge of the fabric and bring it just shy of that crease that you made and give it a press. And do this along the full strip of the fabric. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going to fold the fabric back up along that original crease we made and give everything a good press to get it nice and flat. And we are going to do the same thing with the other handle. I'm going to put a few clips along here to hold it in place until we take it to the sewing machine and sew it. Now we're just going to do the same thing with the other handle that we did with the first one. Now we're going to take our 2 outer pieces and we are going to place them right sides together. Line up your edges, and then we're going to place clips, or you could use pins, along 3 sides of the square. And we are going to do the same thing with the lining fabric. And then we are going to take it to the machine and sew a seam along all 3 sides, and the same thing with the lining fabric. Now we're going to sew our straps. So I'm going to sew along the edge that was open, and I'm using about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to sew this closed. I'm going to sew to the end of this strap, and now I'm going to feed my next strap in and do the same thing with that one. Now I'm going to sew the outer pieces together. I am using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to continue sewing until I get to the corner. As I I reach the corner, I'm going to leave my needle in the down position, lift my presser foot, and pivot my fabric and sew along the bottom edge. When I get to the next corner, I am going to do the same thing. I'm going to leave my needle in the down position, lift my presser foot, turn my fabric, and sew this last seam. We're going to do the same thing with our 2 liner pieces. Now this is optional, but I sewed a seam along the other edge of my straps so they're symmetrical, and I just liked the way they look, but it is optional. Next, we're going to clip our corners on the outer and the liner fabric to reduce bulk. So just clip the bottom corners off of the 2 pieces of fabric. Next, I'm going to take my lining piece and I'm going to turn this right side out, being careful to push my corners out and get this turned completely right side out. I'm going to tuck this lining piece into the outer piece of my lined fabric tote bag, and I'm going to push this all the way to the corner and make sure it is tucked in there. And I'm going to make sure the side seams are matched up as well, and that this is nice and flat. I'm going to take my strap and place it like this. I'm going to mark about 3 inches in for the placement of my straps, 3 inches from the side seam, and I'm going to place it in between the outer layer and the liner fabric, being careful to make sure your straps aren't twisted. So I'm going to line up the side seams and place a clip here, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Line them up and place a clip. And then I am going to place a clip to hold my straps in place. I'm just going to double check my measurement of these, that they're evenly spaced. And then I'm going to place a clip to hold that in place. And I'm going to flip this over and do the same thing with my other strap. And the next thing we're going to do is sew all the way around this bag. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you want to be sure that you leave an opening, a 3-inch opening, to turn this right side out. I'm going to sew 1/4 inch seam allowance along the top of the bag, and when I get to my straps, I'm going to give it a back stitch to reinforce my straps. I'm going to continue sewing all the way around, 1/4 inch, and back stitch when I come to a strap. and then leave that 3-inch opening to turn it right side out. Use this opening here to turn the bag outside in. So I'm going to pull my lining fabric out and leave it outside in. This is what it should look like. And we are going to make our boxed corners. So you want to open your fabric and line your seams, the top and bottom seam. And then we're going to make a mark 1.5 inches from this point. I'm going to use my friction pen to draw a line, and then I am going to place some clips to hold this in place and repeat this on the 3 other corners. Now it's time to sew our boxed corners. You want to stitch right on the line that you made. So I am going to sew right along this line and continue doing this with my other 3 corners. To trim the boxed corners, I'm going to use my ruler and I am going to place along the line that I sewed and cut 1/4 inch away from that line. And then I'm going to repeat this with the other 3 corners. Now I'm going to take the tote bag and turn it right side out. I'm going to take my lining fabric and tuck it into the tote bag. Now I'm going to take my iron and give this a good press all the way around the tote bag. I get to the opening here, I am going to tuck it in and finger press it, and then take my iron and give this a good press, and then take my lining fabric and give that a good press, and then just continue pressing along the entire top edge of the tote bag. The last step is to sew this opening closed. I'm going to take it to my machine and give it a top stitch here. I am sewing about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I'm going to sew all the way around the tote bag. And it is complete. Our lined fabric tote bag is finished. It came together really quickly, and I can come up with many cute uses for this bag.